The mistress couldn't believe her eyes when the pregnant wife she'd been mocking for months had her lover's arm bent backwards, his face twisted in agony, begging for mercy he never gave. Sarah stood frozen in her red dress, the same dress she wore to seduce another woman's husband, screaming, "You said she was helpless! You said she'd never fight back!" But Mark couldn't answer. His jaw was already broken. This was Emily, the woman whose tears they'd laughed at over dinner, the woman who served them food while 6 months pregnant, listening to them call her too pathetic to leave, too weak to matter, the woman whose hands trembled every night as she prayed for a love that died long ago. But they made one fatal mistake. They thought her silence was surrender. They thought her gentleness was weakness. They thought a woman who chose peace had forgotten how to bring war. "I begged you," Emily whispered, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face, her pregnant belly rising and falling with controlled breath. "I begged you to just love me, to just see me. But you brought her into our home and told her I was nothing." What Mark never knew, what Sarah discovered too late, was that before Emily became the broken wife who cried herself to sleep, she was a national kung fu champion who once put 3 men in comas with her bare hands. How much can a woman's heart endure before it stops feeling pain and starts delivering it? How long can you mock someone's kindness before you meet their fury? And what happens when the woman you destroyed remembers she was always indestructible? But to understand how Emily ended up here, standing over the broken bodies of the 2 people who shattered her world, we have to go back to 3 years ago when she made the biggest mistake of her life. She fell in love with a man who saw her gentleness and mistook it for stupidity. Emily met Mark at a charity event. She was there volunteering, serving food to guests who barely looked at her. He was there networking, shaking hands with people who could make him richer. When he smiled at her across the room, something in her chest lifted for the first time in years. She had spent the last 6 months hiding from the world after what happened in the tournament. The tournament where her final strike sent a woman to the hospital for 3 months. The tournament where Emily looked at her own hands and saw weapons she could no longer control. So she walked away from everything, the trophies, the training, the discipline that had shaped her since she was 6 years old. Her sensei, Master Chen, tried to stop her. "Emily," he said, his weathered face filled with concern, "walking away from who you are won't change what happened. It will only make you forget your strength when you need it most." But Emily didn't listen. She wanted to be normal. She wanted to be soft. She wanted to be the kind of woman a good man could love without fear. Mark seemed like that good man. He was charming, successful. He made her laugh when she thought she'd forgotten how. And when he proposed after 6 months, she said yes, believing this was her second chance at a peaceful life. She was wrong. The first year of marriage was fine. Not perfect, but fine. Mark worked long hours, Emily kept the house. They existed in the same space without really seeing each other. But it was quiet, it was safe, and for Emily, that felt like enough. Then his mother, Linda, came into the picture like a storm Emily never saw coming. Linda didn't just dislike Emily, she despised everything Emily represented. "My son married a nobody," Linda said during their first Sunday dinner together, her voice dripping with disgust masked as concern. "A girl with no education, no family name, no prospects. What exactly do you bring to this marriage, dear?" Emily swallowed the humiliation and smiled. "I bring love." Linda laughed. "Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't build legacies. Love is what poor people cling to when they have nothing else." Mark said nothing. He just cut his steak and let his mother destroy his wife piece by piece. That should have been Emily's first sign. But she loved him, and love, she thought, meant enduring. The second year got worse. Mark started coming home late, started smelling like perfume that wasn't hers, started looking at her like she was furniture that had lost its appeal. And Emily, trying desperately to save what was already dead, made herself smaller, quieter, more obedient. She stopped asking where he'd been, stopped questioning the lipstick on his collar, stopped expecting him to see her as anything more than the woman who kept his house clean. Then she got pregnant. For one beautiful moment, Emily thought this would fix everything. She imagined Mark's face lighting up, imagined him pulling her close and promising to be better, imagined their baby bringing back the man she fell in love with. Instead, when she told him, he stared at her belly like it was a problem he didn't know how to solve. "Are you sure you want to keep it?" Those 7 words broke something in Emily that never fully healed. But she smiled through the pain and said, "It's our baby, Mark. Of course I want to keep it." He nodded slowly. "Okay, but things are going to have to change. I can't have you being needy right now. I'm in the middle of a huge deal." A huge deal. That's what mattered. Not her, not their child. A deal. 6 months into her pregnancy, Emily was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with the baby. She was carrying a life inside her while watching her marriage die in front of her eyes. Mark barely touched her anymore, barely spoke to her unless it was to criticize. "You're getting fat," he said one morning, looking at her swollen belly with disgust. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "Yeah, well, try not to let yourself go completely." She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. She wanted to ask him when he became so cruel. But instead, she just nodded and made him breakfast. That's when Linda started visiting more often, always with some new insult disguised as advice. "Emily, dear, you really should try to look presentable. Mark is a successful man. People are watching." "Emily, maybe you should consider hiring help after the baby comes. You're not exactly capable of managing a household and a child." "Emily, I do hope this baby inherits Mark's intelligence. We can't all be blessed with your simplicity." Every word was a knife, and Emily bled quietly, alone in a house that stopped feeling like home. But the worst was yet to come, because Mark wasn't just distant. He wasn't just cruel. He was bringing another woman into their lives, and that woman's name was Sarah. Sarah walked into Emily's life on a Tuesday afternoon, and from the first moment, Emily knew this woman was the reason her husband stopped pretending to love her. Mark brought her home without warning. Emily was in the kitchen, one hand on her 6-month belly, the other stirring soup she'd made from scratch, because Mark once said he liked it. The front door opened and she heard 2 voices, his and hers. "This is my place," Mark said, his tone light and proud in a way he never sounded when talking to Emily. "Come on in, I'll give you the tour." Emily's hand froze on the spoon. She heard heels clicking against the hardwood floor. Expensive heels, confident heels, the kind of heels Emily used to wear before Mark told her they made her look like she was trying too hard. When they walked into the kitchen, Sarah saw Emily first, and the look on Sarah's face said everything Emily needed to know. Pity mixed with triumph, the look a woman gives when she's already won. "Oh," Sarah said, her eyes traveling slowly from Emily's swollen belly to her bare feet to her simple dress. "You must be Emily." Mark didn't introduce them properly. He just said, "Emma, this is Sarah. She's working on the Riverside project with me. We're going to be in my office for a few hours." Emily's throat tightened, but she forced a smile. "Nice to meet you. Would you like something to drink?" Sarah glanced at Mark with barely concealed amusement. "No, thank you. We have everything we need." They disappeared into Mark's home office. The door closed and Emily stood there, soup still simmering, tears beginning to burn behind her eyes. For the next 3 hours, she heard them laughing, low voices, the kind of intimacy that doesn't exist between coworkers. At one point, Emily walked past the office door and heard Sarah say, "You're so much smarter than you give yourself credit for. She's lucky to have you." And Mark replied, "I don't know about that. Sometimes I think I settled." Settled. Emily's legs nearly gave out. She pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself, her pregnant belly suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. She wanted to burst through that door, wanted to scream, wanted to ask him how he could say something so cruel with her standing just feet away. But she didn't, because the Emily who would have fought back died 3 years ago in that tournament. The Emily who existed now just survived. When Sarah finally left, Mark walked her to the door like a gentleman. Emily watched from the kitchen as he touched Sarah's lower back, leaning in close to whisper something that made her laugh. After Sarah drove away, Mark came back inside and walked right past Emily like she was invisible. "How was your meeting?" Emily asked softly. "Fine," he said, without looking at her. "What's for dinner?" That was it. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what just happened, just a question about food. Emily served him the soup she'd made. He ate it in silence, scrolling through his phone, probably texting Sarah. When he finished, he pushed the bowl toward her and said, "Too much salt." She'd made it the same way for 3 years. He'd never complained before. The next week, Sarah came over, again and again and again. Each time, Mark grew bolder, more careless. He stopped pretending it was about work. Sarah would arrive in clothes that were too nice for a business meeting. She'd touch Mark's arm when she talked. She'd look at Emily like she was a stain that needed cleaning. One evening, Emily gathered every ounce of courage she had left and confronted Mark. "I know what's happening," she said, her voice shaking. "I know about Sarah, and I need you to choose her or us, her or your family." Mark looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. Not a small chuckle, a full, cruel laugh that made Emily's blood run cold. "Choose?" he repeated. "Emily, you don't get to give me ultimatums. You don't have that power. Look at yourself. You're 6 months pregnant. You have no job, no money, no family that matters. Where exactly are you going to go?" The words hit her like physical blows. "I'm your wife," she whispered. "You're a wife," he corrected, "not the only option I have." Emily felt something crack inside her chest. Not break, crack, like the first fracture in ice before it completely shatters. "Why did you marry me?" she asked, tears finally spilling over. "If you think so little of me, why did you marry me?" Mark shrugged, his face cold and detached. "Because you were easy, Emily. You didn't ask questions. You didn't demand anything. You just existed. And for a while, that was exactly what I wanted. And now I want more." He walked away, leaving her standing there with one hand on her belly and the other pressed against her mouth to hold back the sobs. That night, Emily lay in bed alone. Mark slept in the guest room now and felt her baby kick, strong, insistent kicks, like the baby was trying to tell her something. "Wake up, Mama. Fight back, Mama. Don't let them destroy you, Mama." But Emily didn't know how to fight anymore. She'd spent 3 years training herself to be gentle, to be quiet, to be everything Mark said he wanted, and now he was telling her it was never enough. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was a Sunday. Emily had just come back from church, her belly heavy, her spirit broken. She walked into her house and froze. Sarah was sitting on Emily's couch in Emily's living room, drinking coffee from Emily's favorite mug, and Mark was sitting next to her, his arm casually draped across her shoulders. "Oh, good, you're home," Mark said, as if this were perfectly normal. "Sarah's going to be joining us for dinner. Make something nice, would you?" Emily's vision blurred. Her hands started trembling. "Mark, can I talk to you privately?" He sighed, like she was being difficult. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here." Sarah smiled, sipping Emily's coffee, looking completely comfortable in another woman's home. Emily's voice broke. "This isn't appropriate. She shouldn't be here." "Why not?" Mark asked, his tone challenging. "This is my house. I can invite whoever I want." "It's our house," Emily said, her voice rising despite herself. "Our home, the home where we're supposed to raise our baby." Sarah laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetie, you really think you have a say here? Look at you, you're falling apart." Emily's breath came faster. Her chest felt tight. "Mark, please, please don't do this." He stood up, and for a moment, Emily thought he might actually ask Sarah to leave, thought he might remember who she was, who they were supposed to be. Instead, he walked toward Emily and said, "You're embarrassing yourself. Go make dinner and stop being dramatic. Sarah's staying. Get used to it." Emily's hands balled into fists. Years of training she'd tried to forget suddenly pulsed through her muscles. Muscle memory doesn't forget even when you beg it to. "I'm not doing this," Emily said quietly. "Not doing what?" Mark stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "Cook dinner? Because that's literally the only thing you're good for. So yeah, you will." Sarah chimed in from the couch. "Mark told me you're too weak to fight back, that you just take whatever he gives you." I almost didn't believe him, but wow, he was right. Too weak to fight back. Those words echoed in Emily's head as Mark reached out and grabbed her arm, not gently, pulling her toward the kitchen. "Let go of me," Emily said, her voice low and dangerous in a way it hadn't been in 3 years. "Or what?" Mark challenged. "What are you going to do, Emily? Hit me? Please, you couldn't hurt a fly." He shoved her forward and Emily stumbled, her hands instinctively going to her belly to protect her baby. That's when something inside her didn't crack anymore. It shattered completely, and what emerged from the broken pieces wasn't the gentle wife who cried herself to sleep. It was the warrior who had been screaming to get out for 3 years. Emily's breathing changed, deepened. Her stance shifted, subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. Her center of gravity lowered. Her eyes, which had been filled with tears moments before, went completely calm. Master Chen used to say, "The most dangerous fighter is the one who has nothing left to lose." Emily had just lost everything. Mark saw the change but didn't understand it. "What's that look?" he asked, laughing nervously. "You trying to scare me?" Sarah stood up from the couch, sensing something shift in the room's energy. "Mark, maybe we should just order takeout." But Mark wasn't done. His ego, his cruelty, his absolute certainty that Emily was powerless pushed him forward. He shoved her again, harder this time, his hand making contact with her pregnant belly. "Move, you're in Sarah's way," he sneered. "What are you gonna do? You're pathetic." And that's when Emily finally let go of the woman she'd been pretending to be. Her hand shot out so fast, Mark didn't even see it coming, and grabbed his wrist. Not gently, not like a wife, like a master who had spent 20 years training her grip to be unbreakable. Mark's eyes went wide. "What the—" Emily twisted. A simple, precise motion, and Mark's entire body bent forward, his arm locked behind his back at an angle that made him gasp in pain. "Emily," he started to say, but she wasn't listening anymore. Sarah screamed, "What are you doing? Stop!" Emily's voice came out calm, terrifyingly calm. "You said I was too weak to fight back." She applied more pressure, and Mark cried out, his knees buckling. "You said I was pathetic." Another adjustment of her grip, and Mark's shoulder joint began to separate. "You brought her into my home," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face, even as her hands remained steady as steel in her grip. "I was nothing." Sarah rushed forward to help Mark, but Emily's free hand shot out, catching Sarah's wrist mid-motion. Emily pulled, using Sarah's momentum against her, and suddenly Sarah was on the ground, her expensive red dress twisted around her, staring up in absolute terror at the pregnant woman she'd been mocking for months. "You said she was helpless," Sarah screamed at Mark. "You said she'd never fight back." Mark tried to speak, tried to answer, but Emily's grip tightened on his arm, and he heard and felt something in his jaw crack as she swept his legs and brought him down to the floor beside his mistress. Emily stood in the wreckage of her living room, breathing steady and controlled, while Mark writhed on the floor holding his arm, and Sarah scrambled backward, her red dress torn, her face streaked with mascara and terror. The woman they had mocked, the woman they had broken, the woman they thought would never fight back was standing over them like a force of nature they never saw coming. "Emily, stop!" Mark gasped, his voice wet with pain. "Please, I'm sorry." "Sorry?" Emily's voice cracked, not with weakness, but with 3 years of buried rage finally breaking free. "You're sorry now when your arm is broken, when you're on the floor. Where was your sorry when you brought her into our home? Where was your sorry when you shoved your pregnant wife?" Sarah tried to crawl toward the door, but Emily's foot came down, not on her, just in her path. A warning. Sarah froze, looking up at Emily with eyes that finally understood what Mark should have told her from the beginning. This woman was never helpless. She was just holding back. "Please," Sarah whimpered. "I didn't know. He said you were weak." Emily finished for her. Pathetic, too broken to matter. Emily crouched down, her pregnant belly between her knees, and looked Sarah directly in the eyes. Did it make you feel powerful, sleeping with another woman's husband, sitting in her home, drinking from her cup? Did you feel like you won? Sarah couldn't answer. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Emily's voice dropped to barely a whisper, but every word cut like glass. "You didn't win anything. You just showed me who you both really are. And now you're gonna learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Mark tried to stand, clutching his broken arm. "Emily, this is insane. You're going to jail for this." Emily stood up slowly, her hand resting on her belly, and smiled. Not a happy smile, the smile of someone who had finally stopped caring about consequences. "Am I?" she asked. "You shoved a pregnant woman. You brought your mistress into our home and humiliated your wife. You put your hands on me first, Mark. I have witnesses. I have bruises. I have 6 months of your mother's texts calling me worthless. I have your credit card statements at hotels. I have everything." Mark's face went pale as he realized what she was saying. Emily had been quiet, but quiet people pay attention. Quiet people see everything. Quiet people gather evidence while everyone else is busy running their mouth. "You're going to call an ambulance," Emily said calmly. "You're going to tell them you both fell. And then you're going to sign divorce papers and give me everything I asked for. Because if you don't, every single person in your life, your business partners, your mother, your friends, will know exactly who you are." "You can't," Mark started. "I can," Emily interrupted, "and I will, because I have nothing left to lose. You took everything from me, my dignity, my peace, my love. You can't threaten someone who's already been destroyed. You can only make them dangerous." Sarah was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Emily looked at her without pity. "You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." Then Emily walked to the phone and dialed 911, her voice steady as she spoke. "Yes, there's been an accident at my home. 2 people are injured. They fell during an argument. Please send help." When the ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, they found Mark with a shattered elbow and a fractured jaw. They found Sarah with a sprained wrist in what the paramedics called severe emotional distress. And they found Emily, 6 months pregnant, sitting calmly on the couch with her hands folded over her belly, looking more peaceful than she'd looked in 3 years. The police asked questions. Emily answered every single one with perfect clarity. Yes, her husband had pushed her. Yes, she had defended herself. Yes, she was afraid for her baby. No, she didn't mean to hurt anyone. She just wanted them to stop. The officers looked at her belly, at Mark's guilt-stricken face, at Sarah's expensive clothes and home-wrecking energy, and they wrote their report accordingly. No charges were filed against Emily. The hospital kept Mark for 3 days. His arm required surgery. His jaw was wired shut for 8 weeks, and every single time a nurse asked him what happened, he had to mumble through metal wires that he fell. Sarah was released after 6 hours, but the damage to her reputation was permanent. Someone at the hospital talked, word spread, and suddenly everyone in Mark's professional circle knew exactly what kind of man he was and what kind of woman she was. Emily filed for divorce the next morning. Linda tried to call her, tried to convince her to work it out and think of the family image. Emily blocked her number and never looked back. Mark's lawyer tried to negotiate. Emily's lawyer, the best family attorney in the state, paid for with money Emily had been secretly saving in an account Mark didn't know about, smiled and said, "My client wants the house, full custody, child support, and half of all assets or she goes public with everything. Your choice." Mark signed without a fight. He knew he had no ground to stand on. Not anymore. 3 months later, Emily gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. She named her Maya, which means illusion, because Emily had been living in one for 3 years, and her daughter represented the truth she'd finally found again. She raised Maya in the house that was now fully hers. She went back to Master Chen, who welcomed her with open arms and knowing eyes. "I told you," he said gently. "Walking away from who you are doesn't change what happened. It only makes you forget your strength when you need it most." Emily bowed to her teacher with tears in her eyes. "I won't forget again." She started teaching Kung Fu to other women. Women who had been told they were weak. Women who had been broken by men who thought kindness meant cowardice. Women who needed to remember that choosing peace doesn't mean you've forgotten how to fight. In every single class, Emily would tell them the same thing. Silence is not surrender. Gentleness is not weakness. And the most dangerous person in the room is always the one who's learned to control their power, not the one who's never had any. Mark tried to see his daughter once. Emily met him at the door, Maya in her arms, and said simply, "You gave up the right to be her father when you put your hands on her mother. Don't come back." He never did. Sarah sent a letter months later trying to apologize, trying to explain. Emily burned it without reading it. Some people don't deserve your forgiveness. They just deserve your silence. Years later, when Maya was old enough to ask about her father, Emily told her the truth in words a child could understand. "Your father forgot that love means respect. He forgot that strength comes from kindness, not cruelty. And he forgot that the quietest person in the room is often the strongest." "Are you the strongest, Mama?" Maya asked, her eyes wide. Emily smiled, pulling her daughter close. "I'm strong enough to protect you, strong enough to protect myself, and strong enough to know that I never have to prove it unless someone forgets." Maya hugged her tight. "I won't forget, Mama." "Good," Emily whispered into her daughter's hair. "Because you come from a long line of warriors, and warriors don't destroy people. We protect them." "But when someone tries to destroy us, what do?" Maya asked. Emily's eyes held a quiet fire, the same fire that had put 2 people in the hospital and set her own soul free. "We remind them why they should have left us in peace." And that's exactly what Emily did. She didn't destroy Mark's life out of revenge. She simply stopped protecting him from the consequences of his own actions. She stopped making herself small so he could feel big. She stopped carrying his shame like it was hers to bear. She just let him fall under the weight of everything he'd done. And she walked away into a life where she never had to pretend to be weak again. Because the truth is, the most powerful thing a woman can do isn't proving she's strong. It's remembering she always was. Sometimes it takes the worst betrayal to remind you of the warrior you forgot you'd been. Sometimes it takes being pushed to your breaking point to realize you were never breakable in the first place. Emily wasn't a victim who got revenge. She was a warrior who simply stopped pretending to be anything less than what she'd always been. And in the end, that was the greatest power of all. The power to choose peace and the power to end it when peace is no longer possible. Mark spent the rest of his life knowing he married a queen and treated her like a servant, that his biggest mistake wasn't the cheating, it was forgetting who she was. And Sarah, she learned the hard way that some women aren't competition. They're just waiting for you to reveal how small you really are. As for Emily, she never needed to throw another punch. She just lived her truth, raised her daughter, taught her students, and became the woman she was always meant to be before she met a man who made her forget. Strong, unbreakable, free. And if you ever asked her if she regretted what happened that day, she'd tell you something her sensei taught her long ago. Regret is for people who wish they'd fought back. I have no regrets, only gratitude that I finally remembered who I was. Thank you for watching Emily's story. If this touched your heart, if it reminded you that you're stronger than anyone who ever tried to break you, then please hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that might change your life. And in the comments, tell us, where are you watching from? Are you watching from New York, London, Lagos, Tokyo? Let us know, because this family stretches across the whole world, and your voice matters. Every time you subscribe, every time you comment, you're helping us share stories of strength, survival, and second chances with people who need them most. So subscribe, turn on that bell, and remember, the quietest person in the room might just be the one who changes everything. Thank you, family. Until next time.